Hi, this is Gail with BERNINA of Naperville, and welcome to finally our first lesson of Twilight Garden. Now, we like to do things a little bit differently at BERNINA of Naperville, and one of those is when we get a month-by-month lesson, we like to kind of zhuzh it up a little bit or add our own twist on things. So basically, if you are stumbling upon this video, this is the first installment of a 12-part lesson, which is a block of the month, that is designed and taught by Bernina of America. Now, those lessons live at the Bernina Skill Hub. Bernina Skill Hub is the direct-to-customer learning platform to teach you how to use your machine, do all of those things, while yours truly sleeps. I really think it's just a great addition to the educational curriculum that we offer at Bernina of Naperville. So Julie, Haley, Jamie, all of your favorite Bernina educators have contributed to lesson plans for the Twilight Garden quilt that lives on the Skill Hub. So how do you get these lessons? How do you participate? How do you do all of that? Well, it starts by going to berninaofnaperville.com and purchasing the Twilight Garden quilt kit. And in that kit, you're going to get, first and foremost, your access codes for the Twilight Garden quilt. So that's $300 right there. And basically, when you go on to the Skill Hub, you're just going to go on, create a username and login if you haven't done that already. Once you get all of that set up, you're going to find the Twilight Garden. You're going to select it. You're going to go through the checkout process. At some point in the checkout process, there's a little pop-up that will appear, and that's like, do you have a promotional code? Or it's a little line right there in the checkout process that says promotional code. Well, the promotional code is where you're going to enter your access codes. And then once you go through that process, it'll change your $300 to $0, and then it'll put it on your dashboard. And then each month, as more lessons populate, you're going to see more videos. There's 2 to 3 parts per each lesson per month, just from Bernina of America. Now, where does Bernina of Naperville come in? Well, we've curated the fabric, and you can see the original colorway behind me here on my lesson 1 blocks, but we also have 3 other colorways. We have Coastal Vibes, Botanic Earth, and Strawberry Kisses. And so we'll be taking you through how we assigned our colors, how we came up with it, how you can determine where you want to put your fabrics for your quilt, all of those things. So I'm going to take you step by step. Hopefully, some of it, you might put some colors together and after you make it, you might not like it so much either. So it just depends on how you want to do it. So I talked about our kit. So our kit has 7 yards of the background fabric, and then it has a yard each of the accent fabrics. Now, that's not enough to make the king size quilt, which is the 96 by 96 large version, but that will make the small quilt. However, if you're like, no, I want to supersize mine, Gail, I want to do all of those things, well, then we have an expansion kit that's available, so you can add that extra yardage that you're going to need for the kit. But the kit, the main kit, not the expansion kit, also has thread. It has this presentation deck that we're going to email to you once a month and all kinds of goodies. So if you have any questions, drop me a line at gail@berninaofnaperville.com, or you can call the store at 331-472-4231. Now, I talked about an interactive presentation deck that you're going to get from me emailed to your inbox once a month. Well, let's sit down at the computer and have a look at that and roll up our sleeves and just see what we're in for.
Twilight Garden Sew Along presentation deck. And they're pretty much going to be the same format for all of our lessons as we go through. So you get this in PDF form, and there are links where you can click right through them and get you right to where I want you to go. So for instance, if you've never signed up for the Bernina Skill Hub before, or you don't have any knowledge of it, I have the link right here. You're going to go to the Skill Hub. Now, I'm looking at this page because I already have an email, username, and password. However, you may stumble upon a page with a login button, and you can register for an account there. I'm going to give you these instructions as we go along each month so that, no matter when you join us or whatever, you'll have the instructions that I kind of walk you step by step through in that email. Now, Bernina of Naperville is adding to your Bernina journey with our own content, tips, tricks, and instructions that will hopefully, I mean, we all like doing decorative stitches, we all like quilting and all of those things. But I also want you to think about these projects and these stitches and these techniques that we're doing to apply that to all kinds of things that you might be doing in your sewing room, not just quilting, maybe some apparel, maybe some crafting, maybe some bags, maybe even some home deck. So, with that in mind, I'd like it if you could watch the Twilight Garden content on the Bernina Skill Hub and then come watch our process or vice versa. But whatever you do, make sure you watch all of the content from both Bernina of America and Bernina of Naperville before you cut into your precious. Because what I will tell you specifically is sometimes I'm constructing this a little bit differently, and my goal is not to duplicate the instructions, and sometimes our videos will focus on different information. Also, we have different colorways that we've incorporated, and it's good to know, well, what are my suggestions for placing out your fabric for those different colorways? Or, I just give you permission to use your own instincts. So we have a schedule. We meet in person the first Tuesday of the month here at the store in Naperville, Illinois, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time. But at the same time, we have an online video that premieres on our YouTube channel at 11 a.m. And that video, that first one, is premiering right now. So hello, everybody. And then we will be doing this every month until September 1st being our last day, and we should be finished with our Twilight Garden quilt. We know where to get the stuff and when we're going to be doing the thing, what are we going to gain from this class? Well, hopefully you will learn the ins and outs of your Bernina 990. But there are going to be times when I give you some guidance to adapt this project to your Bernina 735 Pro through your 790 Pro models. I also can assist you, or if you have any questions, reach out to me or whatever, if you're working on another machine like a Bernina 880. We're going to follow all kinds of decorative stitching techniques that's spearheaded by the Bernina team and some embellishment treatments. And now I'm going to take what you learn from the Bernina side, that's Bernina of America, and we're going to apply them, like I said, to other segments that you might be doing in your sewing room, like home deck, apparel, crafts, and more. We're going to use various threads. We're going to experiment with thin thread, thick thread. What is different thread weight? What's the importance of the right needle for the task at hand? And in some cases, we'll need to troubleshoot. Now, Haley's got a lesson coming up. I think that's going to be in December, where you're actually going to be troubleshooting the balance. And then, of course, at the end of every lesson, we should think about machine maintenance and making sure that we clean out our machines and we oil them and really have them running like a top, because you know what? It's a fuzzy business doing all this decorative stitching with cotton thread. Hopefully, you'll also gain some hands-on experience with the new to you Bernina feet and attachments. Well, look at this. So these are the supplies that you need for the whole kit and caboodle. This is kind of what is suggested from Bernina if you're making this quilt start to finish through the 12 months that we're going to be doing the sew along. I have a special discount code that you can use at berninaofnaperville.com at checkout to get 25% off. So here are the kits. I mentioned earlier that we have 4 colorways. There's Magical Twilight, Coastal Vibes, Botanic Earth, and Strawberry Kisses. Now, this kit is enough fabric for you to make the small size, the 60 by 72, but you're going to have extra of the main fabric to use to practice techniques that may not be in the small quilt project. So, for instance, this lesson that we're doing, the actual blocks that we're making for the large quilt are not featured in the small quilt. But don't worry, I have a lot of options for you. If you want to make the 96 by 96 inch quilt, there's an expansion kit that you can purchase. And once again, you can just follow the link here and it'll take you right to this expansion kit. And I just want to remind you to buy the expansion kit that coordinates with the colorway that you initially bought of the kit. What does the kit include? Well, the kit that you purchased gave you the Bernina Skill Hub access codes. That's that special number that begins with BSH and then has 8 numbers after it. You're getting 12 spools of assorted weight thread from Aurifil, and you're getting a discount code good on most Twilight Garden related supplies. And this code doesn't have an expiration date, and you can use it many, many, many times. So if you decide you want to supersize your quilt, use this code. If you decide that you want some extra yardage for a binding, a backing, all of that stuff, you can use it. The only thing is some of the stuff that you might need for the project is not coded to work with this discount code. So I will be pulsing out additional things that you may or may not want or need as the months go. So please don't feel like you have to buy everything all at once. I want to sell you everything all at once, but please don't feel pressured to that because you're going to have a year to, invest in this quilt and the tools and the materials that you need to make it as we go along. So the fabric assignments. It's pretty easy what the fabric assignments are for the Magic Twilight colorway because that's what Julie uses in the video. It's what everybody, all the Bernina people are using in the video and what I'm using in our sample example. But we have some other plans, right? So we have a Coastal Vibes colorway where we're going to use the background is this icy mint color. Then we have three accent colors, sea glass, freshwater, and Cozumel blue. And you can see in this description how I have written the Twilight Garden colorways next to the Coastal Vibes colorway. But let's actually see these things in person over at the drawing board. In your presentation deck, you have a link to print a coloring chart like this one. And I just use crayons and match the crayons to the different fabrics in the kit. So this icy mint is the background. So anywhere that you see white in my coloring chart is icy mint. And then I have the green, is the more green color in here. The lighter blue is the lighter blue color, and then the teal is the teal. Now, you might determine that you're going to assign your colors differently, but I kind of thought about it like, you know what I'm going to do? This one is my blue. If we're comparing this to the Magical Twilight colorway, this is the blue. This one is the cornflower. And then this one is the plum, and this one's the eggplant or whatever, right? I have these spelled out in your presentation deck, but I just kind of wanted to, show you my thought process there. Now, there's also thread in your kit, and there is a darker color with the 40 weight paired with the 28 weight. Then there is a lighter teal, once again, with the 40 weight paired with the 28 weight. The same with this icy blue and the mint. Then we have some accent colors, starting with this little coral color, and that's a 28 weight, a 28 weight in gray, a 28 weight in a more green, a pine green color, and then, of course, our 12 weight variegated. And so I can't wait to see how I kind of decide how to use all of these threads and everything. All right, so we have Strawberry Kisses. Now, Strawberry Kisses is the colorway that Amy is making, and that one has totally different colors. So let's have a look over at the drawing board what Amy's picked out for this one. Let's look at our Strawberry Kisses colorway. So Amy colored hers in with crayons as well. And everywhere she kind of colored in the light pink on here as well. And in this case, the light pink is the background. And then in her case, this tealy blue color, this is her interpretation of if we compare it once again to the Magical Twilight colorway that you see Julie working with in the videos, this would be the cornflower blue. This would be the eggplant, and this would be the plum. And then there's also thread, and there's the little pairs of thread in the pink with the 40 weight paired with the 28 weight. There's a light pink, a light salmon, a magenta, and then the accent colors and the 12 weight variegated. Okay, finally, we have our Botanic Earth. Now, let's have a look at the fabrics, but I have not made this one yet because this is the colorway that we're going to be using for our in-person demonstration. So make sure that you check us out on social media if you want to see how these blocks turned out before next month's lesson. And you can find us on Instagram at instagram.com/Bernina of Naperville and on Facebook at facebook.com/Bernina of Naperville. These are the colors. Background is this creme de la creme. So in this case, everywhere that I've colored in this magenta color is going to be this kind of terracotta, not really terracotta, mauvey terracotta. The orange is going to match this kind of orangey brown. And then, of course, the green matches the green. So in this scenario, this is the version of the magical twilight that's cornflower, eggplant, and this is the plum. And then, of course, there are the threads, 40 paired with 28 weight in these situations here. And then we have our accent colors with our 12 weight variegated here. Now, you might have other ideas for how you want to organize the colors with any of the colorways, including the magical twilight. So ultimately, it's up to you. You know, I'm just giving you a guideline, but I really want you to be creative and have fun with this project. Here is the large size in comparison to the small size. And all you're going to have to do is click this image and you're going to get this black and white line drawing so that you can color these in with crayons like we did to kind of associate where you want the colors to go if you don't like the way that we arrange them. Now, let's talk about the differences between the large size and the small size. So if we look here at the small size, we can see that it essentially fits in this area right here. So these are the blocks that we're doing this month. We're doing 3, 6, 21, and 23. But 21 and 23 are not in the small block, and neither is block 3. So I have some options. Block 3 is essentially block 16. So if you picked out these colors right here and did the same technique for this, you could just embellish this one the way you would do here, and then you would omit block 16 when you get to it, right? But I don't think that's right. So I think a better option for you would be to make our additional project or at least do a sample piece on some 14-inch square of background material, right? But the small size does have this 12-inch finished filler square, and this would be a great place to, showcase some embellishment opportunities if you'd like. So I've given you some cutting options here and everything for option 1, where you're making this one. And remember, this is for the small quilt. But option 2 could be used some of the skills that you're going to just observe and watch, or maybe even do a practice block from our lesson 1 to create our special project. Now, I'm making curtain tiebacks, and I think they're really fun. It really goes cute in my house, and I love them. I used a completely different colorway, used completely different fabric, but I used the same stitches that Julie does in the video, and I also use the same technique. Another option, and I made this inside out pouch a while back, and I just played around with the stitches on my machine, and it made for a great project. So this, on this bag here, you see these little scissors. Well, I ended up using that as a canvas for doing the decorative stitches. So if you link here, you can get a little link to this inside out pouch pattern if you'd like to give that a try. But you can see that this pouch is really cute with the decorative stitches that I did on it. Another option is I did a project bag a while back, and this project would lend itself very nicely to doing the decorative stitches here and on the back side. So don't be alarmed if you're not going to actually work this month's project into your quilt if you're making the small size, because there's so many ways that you can utilize it. So like I said, lesson 1, we're focusing on choosing threads for piecing versus decorative stitching, our needle selections, thread weight, methods for precise decorative stitching, using our combination mode, and then finally maintenance and oiling. And then we're going to go through these things, then we're going to jump back here and we're going to talk a little bit about making those linen curtain tiebacks. So here is the thread kit that Bernina put together for this project. Now, if you, like I asked you to, have actually watched the Bernina Skill Hub videos, you'll notice that Julie, is kind of using a pink color. Well, there's not a pink color in this kit. We also preferred not to use pink, but that's another story, right? So the kit, you get these lovely violet colors, like a little light violet and a medium violet, this light blue and the darker blue, plus you get a gray and a green and an eggplant and this 12 weight variegated thread. So let's talk about these kits. Now, also, if you aren't doing the magical Twilight colorway and you're doing something that we picked, we've got that Strawberry Kisses, we've got Coastal Vibes, and we've got Botanical Earth. Well, we've also put some threads in there that we curated to go with those fabrics. So most thread companies, when they put out their thread, they're going to have the same color in multiple different weights. So in this case, our gray spool thread, this is the thicker thread. This is the 28 weight. The green spools are the 40 weight. And as good practice, you're going to wind a bobbin to match your thicker thread. So for instance, we're going to wind a bobbin of our green spool and we're going to load that in our high tension bobbin case. Now, I know that you're probably wondering why. If you watch the videos, there's not a huge explanation on this, but in general, we don't need to put the thick thread through our bobbin because we're not even going to really see the bobbin thread. So if we put a little bit thinner thread in our bobbin, then we can fit more thread on the bobbin and we will have a longer sewing experience. Now, why would we use the yellow bobbin case rather than the black bobbin case that comes in the machine? And that's simply because when you're doing decorative stitching, you want to make sure that absolutely no bobbin thread is poking up through the top. You want a nice domed, very pretty stitch. And for that reason, we're going to draw this up just a little bit. So for those of you that have been Bernina users for a really long time, you may remember a bobbin case that looks like this. This is the CB hook bobbin case with that little finger that comes up through the middle like that. And I'm not sure if you remember, but in order to tighten your bobbin tension on the CB hook bobbin, you thread that little hole in the finger. And we did that for buttonholes. We did it for decorative stitching like satin stitching. And also we did it for pin tucking. So that feature on our jumbo bobbin is now replaced by a separate bobbin case that is the yellow color, which means that it's tighter tension. In contrast, there is an additional third bobbin case that's red. We're not going to be using this one today, but this one does the opposite. This is a looser tension on this bobbin case in case we wanted to put super thick thread in the bobbin and work upside down. I've unwrapped all my spools here and I wanted to kind of show you the difference in the weights. Now, a little note about thread weight. There is no standard of measurement of thread weight across the whole thread industry. So thread weight is relative to the actual brand. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. So I mentioned that the green spools are the 40 weight. And 40 weight is going to be thinner than 28 weight, but it's not going to be the thinnest. And you might be like, wait a minute, did you say that 40 weight is thinner than 28 weight? Yes. And that's because the higher the number, the thinner the thread. And there are thread weights that are like size 100. That's like the hair on your head. very, very fine, used for delicate stitching, blind hems, things like that. Then there's also really thick thread, and it can go as low as 3. And that is like when we get into our pearl cottons and things like that. The thickest thread that we're going to be using in this project, through the needle anyway, is the 12 weight, which is on the red spool here, and that's the variegated thread. So I've just separated the 40 weight on the green spool from the 28 weight on the gray spools. So I'm going to use this one, for instance. And remember, with Aurifil, if you can't find the tail, you can just pop off the little base like that and pull the tail loose. And in some cases, you may not need to take the bottom off. You can just unwind. If I look at these threads, we can see that the one on the right is a little bit thinner than the one on the left. And so in this scenario, we will wind an empty bobbin from the green spool, and we're going to sew with the 28 weight. So I talked about that the weight of the thread is not something that's going to be standard over different brands. So what I wanted to do is take our Aurifil 40 weight, which is the green spool, and compare that to a Metler 50 weight. Metler 50 weight is more of the weight of the Aurifil 40 weight. And I know it's going to be kind of hard to see in this scenario, and I have kind of different colors here and everything, but these two threads, so Metler silk finish cotton 50 weight thread is very similar to the 40 weight. Whereas the Aurifil thread that you're using mostly, these are for those of you that are using Aurifil to piece and things like that, you're using a 50 weight. And the 50 weight Aurifil is more comparable to Efina 60 weight from Wonderfil. This is very fine. And I think that, folks like this Aurifil or Efina finer thread for piecing because you don't get that seam allowance inconsistency from the thickness of the thread, right? It's really fine. It holds well. It sews beautifully, that kind of thing, right? This is a 40 weight Metler thread, which is going to be somewhat closer to what we're using in our 28 weight thread here for our decorative stitching. So I'm just comparing the different brands. So always kind of look at the thread and see how you like the thickness and things like that. We even have a couple of other threads that are 30 weight, and this is an organic 30 weight thread. This is 100% cotton, and this 30 weight thread I think presents a little bit thicker than the Aurifil 28 weight thread. But organic thread is here on the right, and to me, it looks a little bit thicker. But nonetheless, just things to be mindful of. And yes, you have a thread kit that you purchased with the kit, but I want you to be brave. I want you to be daring, and I want you to know that this is your project. And if you have some fun threads in your repertoire, I mean, even something like this is a 12 weight metallic and rayon thread that goes very lovely through a top stitch size 90 needle. I want you to know that you have my permission to experiment with this because that is what this quilt project is all about. We even have a 12 weight all cotton that's called Spaghetti, and this is from Wonderfil. So this could be something that you could incorporate later as well. This is the 12 weight Aurifil. If you wanted to compare, the Aurifil has more of a twisted yarn texture, whereas the Wonderfil brand has a little smoother look. But nonetheless, they both will go lovely through either a 90 size or a 100 size top stitch needle. which leads me to the needles that we're going to be using this month. So this month we're using a 80 microtex needle for most of our piecing. And then we're going to be using a 90 top stitch needle with this 28 weight thread. Great, so we have some fabric. Now, in the Magical Twilight colorway, which is what I'm going to be doing for the video, we have this 7 yards that you initially get in your kit if you want to make the small size. And remember, I talked about the expansion pack if you wanted to go for that 96 by 96 inch size quilt. So this is going to be our main color. Now you can choose how you incorporate the purple and the eggplant and the lighter blue. You can do it just like Julie does in the video, or you can put your own twist on it. Also, the same goes for your thread color choices. You know, if you want to use green instead of pink or gray instead of pink, that's totally fine. I tend to like my stitching to be a little bit more monochromatic. So I'm just going to kind of put what I want in there and we just work with it every month because it's going to be so awesome no matter what you choose. Okay. Now, here's a little Gail tip. So we have these at least 5 empty bobbins that I want you to have, right? And in the Bernina instructions, they want you to wind a 40 weight with each 28 weight thread. Plus, if you're using a thread to sew things together. I'm not really using this one, but let's pretend, right? So with that in mind, you're going to need 5 bobbins. But one thing I do want you to consider is that you don't necessarily have to match perfect. And there's no reason why you can't do decorative stitching with your 40 weight thread either. Because if you do a skinnier, tinier stitch, you might want 40 weight thread versus your larger stitches where you might go for a thicker thread because you wouldn't want to draw a tiny little sketch with a fat Sharpie marker. The same goes for your thread. So I'm going to go ahead and wind a bobbin of each of these. But when I go in to use my gray or my green or whatever, I'm probably going to pair those with, my dark blue or my darker purple. I did a few little samples just to kind of test the thread and the bobbin and kind of messing around a little bit with using that yellow bobbin case versus the black bobbin case. So first of all, this is what I landed on with how I want to set up my machine. I'm doing a securing feature, the pretzel button, right? And I have that programmed to stitch 6 stitches really close together. This is going to help me remove the stabilizer without ripping the stitches out. Then I set up my pattern end stitch to secure with 6 little running stitches. Then it's going to cut, lift the needle, and lift the presser foot. But let's have a look. So this is the 28 weight thread, the lighter blue. I think it's the robin's egg blue. I've got that in my top of my machine, and I'm using the 90 top stitch needle. Now I did experiment a little bit under here, and I want to kind of show you. So this was the one that I was very happy with. I don't get any knotting at the end or the beginning. I didn't really have to hold my threads or anything. That little securing stitch really does the trick there. This one, I forgot to press the pretzel button at the beginning when I started stitching. So that's just a habit that we're going to have to get into, right? But this first stitch here is the 40 weight thread in the bottom and the 28 thread on the top. So we're looking at the wrong side here. Then this one was using the 40 weight thread with the black bobbin case. And in this case, this is the matching thread weight to the blue color up above. In this one, I did not start off with the pretzel and I didn't hold my thread. So you can see I got a little bit of, a little toupee right there, a little bit of thicky stuff, right? Now it's on the back side. We'll never see it. And some of these blocks, we're trimming them down. This is not a machine defect. It's just, there's some little, there's things here. We talk about precise decorative stitching. And this is how you get there, my friends. So then this one I switched to the 40 weight purple just so we see some kind of contrast. Once again, I didn't do the securing stitches at the beginning, and you see I've got that little toupee again there. So now I did the securing stitch, did not hold my thread, and started off. Ta-da. So this one was using the black bobbin case. You can see I can see way more purple thread in this one. And then this one I changed to the yellow bobbin case where I can see little dots of my blue thread from up above, which essentially give us a beautiful looking stitch without seeing any purple at all. I can see little purple dots through this one, but not through this one. And that's why we use that yellow bobbin case. And truly, it's along the same principles as when we do our machine embroidery. So when we're setting up for decorative stitch, like these rows of pretty stitches, whichever ones you want to choose, all of that, you are drawing up your bobbin and the upper thread is going to be looser. So you really want to see the thread coming through on the bottom when you're doing decorative stitching, much like your embroidery stitching. Because, hey, guess what? Back before we had fancy computerized embroidery modules on our machine, this was considered to be embroidery. We've come a long way, folks. So before we get started, let's follow along on some instructions for setting up your securing stitches. Let's go into our machine and set it up for some decorative stitching. So this is our 990. Now you can also do this on your Bernina 7 series and the 5 series. Okay, so I'm going to go into our sewing segment, and now I'm going to be using the number 20 C foot. And then no matter what decorative stitch we're using, even the straight stitch, I want to set up these external buttons. There's the external pretzel button, and there's the external pattern end button. And let's go to our settings tab under our menu, and we're going to go to sewing, and we're going to go to external buttons, and we're going to start with pattern end, and we're going to make sure it secures and that it picks running stitches with a repetition of 6. Now we're going to go to securing, which is the pretzel. See how it looks like a little pretzel there? And we're going to pick these with the running stitches and 6. Now these settings will stay here until you change them again. So you can turn the machine off and on again, and these settings will keep. Now, I know I said this isn't going to be shown in the video, but it is. Haha. Okay. So on your 735 Pro through the 790 Pro machines and some other Bernina models, you're going to hit the cog and wheel gear. You're going to go to your sewing settings. You're going to program the external buttons. And for the tie off button, you're going to select the pretzel, which is this, and that's your external button that's kind of over here on some of your machines. When you get there, you're going to touch the little dot, dot, dot. That's your running stitch, and change that number to 6. You're going to go back a breadcrumb, and then you're going to choose the pattern end button. And once again, we want this to secure. So we activate the pretzel that if it has the white ring around it, that means that it's activated. And we're going to change that to 6. And I want it to cut and lift the presser foot. And then you can close your screen, that little X in the corner. So you probably noticed when Julie started the initial stitching that I'm going to do here, she just did a straight stitch on top of the drawn lines, like you saw, or like you're seeing here. But she was using the number 1 foot. And the number 1 foot is our standard reverse pattern foot. And it's got a little line down the middle of the foot. And it looks just like this. And she's lining up that center piece right with that line. Now, that could be a challenge for you. I might be a little older than Julie and my eyes aren't as good, right? So you might consider a clear foot. This is number 34C and number 34D if you want dual feed, and you line that little red line right up to that drawn line. So that's an option. But another option is using our open toe foot and to turn on our laser. And now we can really see where we're stitching. We can also turn the camera on our machine so we can see the fabric with the drawn line, and we can line that simulated stitch that's on our screen up with our drawn line.
And I want you to notice that when we press the little pretzel button, it shows up down here on the screen like that, and that's just so I know that that's engaged. When I press the pattern end button, which is over here, it's a hard button on my machine, it illuminates and then it will just automatically stop, cut, lift the needle, and lift the presser foot when I'm done stitching. I've pressed my securing button or my tack button or whatever you want to call it, and I have elongated my stitch to 3 just like Julie recommends in the instructions. And now I'm going to stitch right on top of my marked lines, and you can see here on my screen with the camera, I am moving the very start dot right to the edge, and I'm making sure that my simulated stitch there is lining up on my charcoal dot. And then now my needle's in the center position, but it does not look like it's in the center until I lower my foot. So don't be alarmed if that happens. Now remember, I'm going to be doing like 6 little stitches. There we go. And now just gently, carefully, and deliberately use that laser and the openness of this open toe foot to guide perfectly straight down your chalk line. Perfect. Now, do you notice what I did? I forgot to tack, but we've got a lot more stitches to do here. Let's start again. I'm pressing the pretzel button. We're going to start at the beginning. And now when I get to the edge here, I'm going to press my end button, the one that illuminates. And now it's going to secure and cut. Now you might want to consider stopping. See how it's doing most of that knotting on the stabilizer? You might consider pressing that button, at least for the straight stitch, 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. So let's do that again on this piece. Starting right on the line. Remember to hit the pretzel button to engage those securing stitches. And now I'm going to just take a few more stitches. And now I'm hitting my pattern end button. And now you can see the knot. And you know another thing? Dun, 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 shocking. I have dark purple thread in my bobbin. You couldn't tell. Maybe just on the stabilizer parts. So just proving my point that let's not get too worked up over what's in our bobbin, especially for the decorative stitching.
Here's the finished straight stitching. And just so you know, I started at the top and went down all the way across. I didn't turn it over when I came back the other direction. How you do it is up to you, honestly. So I have knotted, as I showed you earlier. I used the dark purple in the bobbin, no big deal. I don't even see it on the top here. Now that I've done the stitching, it's time to switch thread colors and stitch some fun things in here. Now, one of the things that you might want to do, you can either pick up a seam guide or a seam gauge like this, and we can measure the distance here. So this is 2 inches. So what I want to do between these 2 inches, for instance, is I want to find the 1 inch mark, which is here, and I want to attach the seam guide onto my number 20 foot. So I'm going to undo the little screw just a little bit. You know these guys. Those are the ones that fall out on you, and Chicken Little thinks the sky is falling, right? Listen, it's happened to us all. Okay, so I'm going to put this guy in here, and I'm using the inch mark on my seam guide where the center needle position would be, and I'm going to tighten this. And now we will align the edge here along that previous stitching as we sew.
Now for this stitch, this is the one that Julie's going to stitch in bright pink, but I'm using the charcoal gray from the kit, and it's $13.91. And it's coming in a little small. Now this could also be something if I wanted to make this even smaller, where I would use thinner thread, but we're going to use the 28 weight and leave the stitch at the default setting. So the only thing I want to do is set up my external pretzel tie off button so that it knots for me at the beginning. And then I'm not going to use my guide quite yet, but I am going to position my left side of my presser foot along the straight stitch so that it looks like this. And so now I'm going to start right on the edge of that fabric. And now I want to show you something really cool on the screen of the machine. If you see the preview of our stitch just here, I will know exactly where I need to hit my pattern end button so it can knot and everything. So when my machine is like kind of right in the middle of this stitch, I'm going to press that pattern end button. And now we can see how nice that looks with my knotting at the beginning and the end. So I can remove my stabilizer easily. So for our wide piece here, we know we need to set our gauge at 1 inch, but we need to measure this distance here, and it should be about 1 inch, but my little chalk pencil that I used made it just a little bit wider, like 1 1/8 inches. So to find the center, I am literally going to just use my laser guide like this, and as I lower my foot, and we're going to go over here, I just want to make sure that my presser foot is centered in between my guides like that. And now once I have it where I like it, I can undo my screw, slide my little guide over like this, and now I'm ready to stitch 1340 down the middle here. Now I also invite you, if you want, you can change your thread colors and do multiple different colors from your thread kit across here. I am sticking with my charcoal gray color. So I'm going to engage the pretzel, and now that's going to knot. And I've kept stitch number 1340 at its default settings. And just like before, I'm looking at my guide on my screen, and I'm hitting my pattern end button. So this will stop, cut for me, tie it off the whole bit. And so now there's that stitching. So with the same alignment process, we're going to do the same thing down the middle of this one, but we're switching our stitches. This time we're picking stitch 1379, and we're going to align this one just like we did the other, but I've already found the center. So we're going to hit the pretzel. And now that one's done. We have one more to do with this technique, and we're selecting stitch number 1390. Select the pretzel. So now we're in these little 2-inch wide gaps here. So that's where we're going to use our tool, our little seam gauge, find our 1-inch mark, which is right here, put that laser from our center needle position, and I'm just going to a straight stitch to do this. Then I'm aligning my guide to the edge of our piece like that. Perfect. And now let's see what stitch we're going to use. It's 1336, and we're stitching it as designed with our pretzel function engaged. You know, somewhere in Steckborn, Switzerland, an engineer is crying because I call this the pretzel stitch. Okay, so for the next stitch, we're using stitch number 1329, and the instructions are to increase the length to 3.2. But if you'll notice here, the length is represented by the millimeter of the stitch pattern. So when you need to be more specific like this, you're going to touch the stitch length button. Then we're going to use our slider or our plus and minus or our stitch length knob to adjust this to 3.2 like that. And notice that the length of the pattern repeat is now 21.3, but we've increased the actual stitches to 3.2. Now we engage the pretzel and we stitch. Now, I'm going to do the unthinkable, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to turn around and go the other direction. Why am I doing this? Well, you see how I have some stitches that are kind of asymmetric, like this one here. I want it to be mirrored. Yes, I could hit the mirror button, but it's just as easy to pivot, okay? So now, let's go over to the screen of the machine. I want to show you something cool. So on our machine, we have history buttons. So we're going to go ahead and expand this. And this little icon here with all the little pages represents history. And look at this. We can see all of the stitches we stitched out, pretty much even in order, right? It's not just that. It's also that it's going to remember how we adjusted them. So for instance, if I select stitch number 1, it's going to remember that I adjusted that to 3 millimeters. So I'm just going to go in the reverse order of what I stitched. So my next one is going to be stitch number 1336. And I'm going to engage the pretzel button. And now I'm going to stitch.
Right, so our stitching for part one is complete. Now, I'm not going to make the whole block quite yet. I'm going to put this aside. I'm going to trim this up, or at least trim my stabilizer square, and then I'm going to cut this down per the instructions. So this is what our piece looks like. So after you've done all your stitching, at this point, you're still leaving your stabilizer on there. We trim our embellished 14-inch square of this cornflower down to 13 inches, and then you're going to cut diagonal to diagonal. But make sure you cut perpendicular to your decorative stitching and not into our decorative stitching there. So we're going to put these aside. And we're going to do all of our piecing at the same time. So that means we're going to piece the first part of the lesson together, then the second part of the lesson. So that leaves me with a new piece that has been interfaced and the lines have been drawn. You can notice this time the lines are more evenly distributed. So we've got 3 inches from the edge with a drawn line, then every 2 inches for 4 lines, and then this is left blank. So now let's do the combination stitches, but follow Julie's instructions and just remember to use my knotting features at the beginning and end of the stitches.
So the machine is threaded up with the leafy green thread, and there's a very important button that's down here. This is combi mode. Now, when I open this, there's no stitches that appear. And then we have this new little column that appears, and that's where our stitch sequence is going to land. So there's a special recipe that we're going to enter, and we're going to start with stitch number 448. I'm going to go ahead and dial it up by the number. And you'll see that it presents just there at the top. And we want to select this 3 more times so that we have 4 little squiggles up there. So now we're going to open up our edit menu, and we're going to touch the 3rd squiggle, and we're going to go into our edit, and we're going to do mirror up down, and we're going to do the same thing to the 4th one, mirror up down. So our stitch sequence is going to be positioned like that. So now we're going to stitch this in the 2nd column, but first we want to tap the 1st stitch like that. And then what I want to do is select all. If you'll notice our selector buttons, this is select one, select some, select all. So I want select all so they all turn blue like this. And then I'm going to hit my pretzel button. And now I'm going to position this in the 2nd column. We've completed our stitching, and now we want to remove what's in combination and pick a new combination. It's pretty simple. I can select all again, press and hold and drag, and OK to delete. So now I'm still in combi mode, but I'm going to close and pick some new stitches for a new combination. This time we're going for stitch number 104 twice. And now we're going to select, make sure the 2nd one is selected, go into edit, and this time we're going to mirror this one so we have more of a serpentine little flower stitch. And so once again, we're going to tap the beginning so that we start at that one. I'm going to touch my pretzel button, and we're going to stitch in the 4th column. Once again, we're deleting that combination. We're going to look for stitch 107, and we're going to do that one twice. And then we're going to go to our alphabets folder, and we're going to type B, and I'm going to expand this, and I'm going to look for my space, which is that one, the underscore, and now we say 990, and I want to put another space after that. Now, one more thing. In the first stitch, we want to tap on it so that just the first stitch is blue, and we're going to mirror that one left, right, or up, down, like this. Mirror it up, down. And then another thing that I want to do is show you how you can save one of these stitches. So we're going to save this, and I'm just going to call it B990. And we can make a folder for this. And I'm going to call it Twilight Garden, TG for short. Now, to get out of combi mode, you press the combi mode button, and it goes back to the stitch that we were on before combi mode. But I want to go to a straight stitch, and this is just a silly little thing. But when I stitch these decorative stitches without a stitching here, I got kind of some puckers over here. Now, they can be remedied by removing the stabilizer, but I just thought, let's do this real quick with a little straight stitch so that we don't have that issue. And this is going to be in the seam allowance. We're not going to see this green thread, so don't be alarmed. Okay, so now let's go back into combi mode. Now, our combination mode is there, but it would also show up under our heart section and our Twilight Garden there. And you see the little combi mode icon that tells us that it's a combination mode and what we named it. So I just wanted to give you that option because, you know, maybe you make this, you go do a straight stitch, life happens, you turn your machine off, and then you're like, where did this go, right? And so there you have it. Now, this wasn't very, difficult to make or anything, but, I just like to show you the things, you know what I mean?
Ooh, so we've done all of our decorative stitching on this one. And as you can see, I already started ripping the stabilizer off because, well, we had a mild kerfuffle there. So with that said, it's okay to remove the stabilizer, I promise. So there's two layers, and typically you're going to remove each layer individually. It'll be easier on your stitches. Okay, so I removed the stabilizer and gave it a pressing. And notice that it's not crispy clean on the back. Don't worry, this is soft. This is the Ultra Clean and Tear. It's not a big deal if it doesn't come all the way out. But success. And I don't even notice my little kerfuffle down there once the stabilizer was removed. Or was it up there? See, I don't even know.
I'm piecing my block with this gray 50 weight thread from Metler. And I'm putting my black bobbin case in now because I want my balance tension. And I'm changing the needle to the 80 sharp. I've got the 97D foot on with the dual feed activated. And now I'm just going to follow Julie's instructions for the rest. And I'll meet you back at the design board.
All right, so blocks are 12 inches finished, which means they're going to measure 12.5 inches. If you don't feel comfortable squaring them up quite yet, you can wait until the end, but I went ahead and removed stabilizers, as you saw. And, I got a little lazy on some of them, but good enough, right? And we have an extra half square triangle left over and an extra half square triangle square. So just hold on to those and let's have a look through our other colorways. That first block that we created with our designs there. And then here is its companion. Then we have the combination and other type of stitching. So here's one. And I decided to mix it up a little bit on this. And, for this coastal vibes, I'm going to go for pops of color and darkness when I'm using the darker fabric like this one as a background. But for now, I'm keeping it kind of like a blendy colorway for it. You can do it completely differently, of course, because this is going to be ultimately your project that you're making, right? And there's our other piece. This is the first one made, so you can see there's that eggplant version, which in her case is the hot pink, and she used the light pink 30 weight or 28 weight thread on that Maldives color. And there's the companion, and then our decorative stitching and combo stitch version. And remember, picking the thread colors and how you want to use them is all up to you. So I'll meet you back here for our special project, which is our curtain tiebacks. Now, I thought years ago, I made a project that is exactly this technique. So I thought you might enjoy doing that with what we've learned this month. So we're going to take two of the stitches that Julie used, stitch number 114 and stitch 1391, and we're just going to alternate them. So if you can see here in my little drawing here, there's a light blue and a royal. It's basically us alternating those stitches. So we're going to cut two rectangles of some linen. I am just using something out of the vault, and I'm using some thread out of the vault to do this. And 14 inches by 21.5 inches is enough to yield us two tiebacks. So let's go over to our design station and see what we're dealing with. Okay, so I was thinking about what kind of project could we do? And, I mentioned in the small quilt, if you do it straight up, like the Bernina instructions say, if you're making a small quilt, you don't have a block this month, and that's not fair. So you can either substitute and make the block 16. That's fine. It's an option. Or you can have playtime and practice some of the techniques that we learned in the Skill Hub lessons. So I just have taken a piece of linen here. This has been backed with fusible woven, and then I've adhered a lightweight tearaway stabilizer to the back. I want to show you the inspiration fabric. This is what my curtains are made of in our dining room, and I need to make some tiebacks because Signor Bonaparte keeps like moving the curtains back and forth, so I want to be able to tie them back every once in a while. I want to make two because we need symmetry, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to be making one. So I have some threads. Now I want to warn you that I'm not using my Aurifil thread from the kit, but I got some confidence to use some of these thicker threads for this project after doing all of the other lessons, right? When we, use our top stitch size 90 needle for the stitching with the thicker thread, we're going to use the yellow bobbin case like you saw. And I wanted to kind of audition, well, what kind of thread do I want to use? And at the end of the day, I found this thread. Don't ask me what it is. It lost its label, whatever, doesn't matter. But I know that this is about a 30 weight, maybe a 40 weight or 30 weight thread here. And it's variegated and it has all of the colors in this embroidery. So I'm going to be boring maybe and do all of my stitching in this one color. I took my ruler and my water-soluble marking pen, and I have marked a line every 1.25 inches. Now, we learned all about that seam guide and how we can make lines based on that. And I want to show you something about how I kind of did these things in the olden days and how I'm adapting to do things a little bit differently, only because I want to become more precise with my stitching. Because, I do a lot of sewing, but I'm not always perfect with straight stitching. It's an attention span thing. So in the past, I could have taken my straight edge. Let's turn this around here like this. I could have set my guide up to 1.25, and then I can just use the edge of my fabric and just stitchy, stitchy, stitch all the way down here like this, right? But you know what happens as we go across, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 lines here, right? So if I'm off by a 1/16 of an inch every time I do my lines, do you know what happens? It's going to be an inch shorter. It's going to either be an inch longer or an inch shorter. So if we want to be accurate, the best way is to draw our widest lines, which is what I've done here. So when I stitch these, my first stitch, I'm going to stitch lining up the center of my stitch right on the straight line like this. Just following that line, not paying attention to the guide that's on the foot. These lines are 1.25 inches apart. Well, that means that when I want to stitch in the middle, rather than trying to eyeball either side of the foot like this, I'm going to set my guide at 5/8 of an inch from the center needle position. So you can see here, if that center needle just there, then I'm going to undo my screw and line this up so that I'm right on that 5/8 of an inch line. And I can see my center needle position because there's a little divot in my foot just there. And of course, this is the 20C. All right, so now I'm ready for the 5/8 part, but I'm also ready to stitch right on top of my lines. I have a lighter weight thread in the bobbin, a 60 weight equivalent. And then, like I told you, I'm putting this variegated thread through the top with my 90 top stitch needle.
I'm using stitches that I already used on the Twilight Garden block. So I'm going to use my history stitches up here at the top. And we're going to start with stitch number 1391. And I also want to make sure that I change my needle plate on my machine. Now, if you have a 790 Pro, 735 Pro, you know, that kind of thing, you don't have the sensors on the back of the needle plate like I do on my 990. So you're just going to make sure that if you've told it you have the straight stitch needle plate on, when you switch out to your 9mm one, you're going to make sure you pick the 9mm one. And now see, my stitching is white because guess what? Now I can do that full width. Turning my laser on to line it up right in the center here because this stitch actually starts in the center. Now, because I am not going to be, I'm going to be cutting our pieces out of here because I'm making the tiebacks. It doesn't matter if I knot or not knot. If I knot or not knot. Not, who's there? Okay, enough, Gail. So now I'm just going to stitch down here like so. Now, there's a couple things that I might want to point out to you. I'm eyeballing moving my needle down the center line. That's one way that we can do this. Another way would be to use the number 1C foot, and we'd be lining up that groove on the foot with the line each time, right? Because I don't really have an identifiable center line to keep it on this piece. But if you have the 990, don't forget that you have that camera where you can line up your work so that it covers. You can see the blue line faintly there, just like that. So you can kind of line it up and you just check here every once in a while as you're stitching. So the choice is up to you how you want to do these stitches, but I'm going to go cover my entire piece and then we'll come back and we'll do the rest of the stitching. Okay, I finished up my stitching and now we're going to go to my favorite stitch, which is stitch number 114. And I'm not going to make any adjustments to it or anything. I'm just going to line it up so that it stitches in the middle of two of those stitches I just previously stitched. And you saw me attach the guide, so I'm still going to be running my guide along my blue drawn line. Okay, I'm just going to continue in this fashion until my entire piece is covered, and then it's time to assemble our tie back.
All right, well, there's our cute piece. And I mean, just a piece like this, you could do a lot of things with. We could fold it and put it and make it a little pouch to like carry our threads in, just put a little zipper in there. I'm sure some of you have experience doing that. But, we don't really do that many home deck projects. So I thought a fun idea would be to make the tie backs, like I said. So out of this piece, we can get two tie back pieces. So we can fold this together like this, lay our piece down, pin it into position, and cut it out. And then once we've cut these out, we're going to do the same with the lining. And I did try to get this centered so that my lines were straight down the middle of the tie back like that. And we're just going to use like a 1/2 inch seam allowance or the side of your number 1 foot. Honestly, we don't have to be too precise, just as long as we're consistent. And we're going to leave an opening right here when we stitch to turn them inside out. Let's take one of these pieces and put it on top of one of these pieces. And like I said, we can either leave the opening up here or down here, just as long as you leave an opening. And I like to find it kind of, somewhere straight. I know this whole thing is curved, and I'm going to be using my standard sewing thread that I use to piece my quilt with this. And that's the same weight thread in the top and bottom with my 80 microtex needle in the top. And then once you've sewn everything together, you're going to make your little clips so that when you turn it, it's going to lay flat. Then you're going to turn it inside out. So I pressed this and I've got like a little opening here that I need to manage, but let's talk about how we could finish this off. Now, I plan on stitching a little eyelet here and here, and I'm just going to do that in my gray thread because it'll blend with this green linen, right? And I could just simply whip stitch this by hand. I could do a little top stitching around here, but I thought it would be really fun if we made some trim. I know we have all these fun threads. I've collected so many fun threads through the years that I thought, hey, let's see how this would work. So I'm going to take a handful of these threads. I've just got to look and see. I don't want anything to look too dark. So I'm not sure I want to incorporate my blues here. Let me see what I have in the minty color. I've got this king cut here. So I'm going to blend the variegated with this king cut. And I need maybe 24 to 50 lengths that are about 2 yards. So I've got my little measuring thing here. And you don't have to do this if you don't want to. You can certainly purchase trim as well. And we need kind of double whatever it is around our piece here. So around our piece is about 1 yard. So we need about 2 yards in total. And I'm just going to keep doing this until I get something thick. Right now I've got about 24 strands. Okay, I've got all my strands and I'm tying the top of them in a knot. like so, so they don't become separated. Now I'm going to take the other end and tie that in a knot as well, just so they stay together. Now, since we have an empty bobbin, I'm going to take this piece here, maybe this end. And I know I just told you to tie a knot in the end, but we kind of need it to not be a knot right now. And give it a little spit. I didn't put that on the supply list, but I'm sure you have an ample supply. And we're going to feed this through one of the holes on our bobbin, like this. And then we're just going to tie it to the bobbin. And if you want to be careful, tie 2 knots here. Go. All right. So now we're going to put this on our bobbin winder, and notice that I tied it to the black part of the bobbin because we want this to be on the top part of the bobbin.
And I have to admit, this is kind of a hard thing to film. But what I'm doing is I'm letting the bobbin winder twist these strands of thread. And remember, when I engage my bobbin winder, it's going to give me a speed here. So I can slow down the speed to make it slower so I feel like things aren't going out of control. As this twists, I'm going to gently hold it up in the air like this. And we're going to let it get really twisty. And then when we feel like it can kind of buckle in on itself, we're going to grab it in the middle, but let me just twist it a little bit more. Okay, we're going to find the middle, keeping it taut, just like this. Take the bobbin off and let it twist on itself. And if you get like a little knot in it, you're just going to gently pull it like this. All right, let's go to the drawing board.
Okay, so with the twisting and everything, I didn't get quite enough to go all the way around my piece. So I'm going to make a longer one, but I'm not worried about using this. I'm going to use this as a cord. So let me show you what we're going to do. You're going to cut this off of your bobbin, like so. And now we're going to tie this in a knot. There we go. Ta-da. So now we have some cord.
Okay, now that I have a properly long cord that will go all the way around my tieback, I'm going to start on one of the ends and I'm picking a zigzag stitch, number 2, with pretty much the default settings. And I'm going to thread my machine with a color that's very neutral to my fabric and my thread. I've got the Microtex 80 sharp needle in there. And now we're going to stitch. And the idea is when the needle is on the right side, it's going to catch the fabric. And when when the needle's on the left side, it's going to catch the fabric. And when it's on the right side, it's going to catch my cord. And I want to move my needle position over just a little bit. And I want to turn hover off. Okay, so I'm at 1.8 millimeters wide and 1.5 millimeters long. and we're just going right over that ditch. And I think I might make it just a little bit wider. There we go. Perfect. See how I'm just abutting it to this edge? And now, while I'm doing this, one of the interesting things about variegated thread is you sometimes can't see all the colors in it on the spool. And I thought this purple was blue when I looked at it, and now I can see that it's purple. It doesn't match my curtains perfectly, but that's okay. I have some white shears that I can use this with, or, you know, we can just use them at the store for a sample. So that's where, if you're doing variegated thread and you're really having to color match, you should stitch any kind of decorative stitch just to make sure it's got all of the colors in it that you want. But you know, I make a lot of things that never go in my house anyway, so it's fine. Okay, so I'm just tucking one behind the other here as we round this final corner. There's where I started. So my final step here is that I'm simply going to place an eyelet right in on the edge here, just like this. Just a little unobtrusive eyelet, and then I'm going to place it in the same spot. And I use my camera and my laser to do this. And if I want to wiggle things around, you know, I do that just to kind of eyeball it. And now I stitch.
Okay, so here's our tie back. Let's look at the back side. Obviously, we're not going to see this side really if it's around a curtain, but look at that little edge. I think that's just such a fine little detail that's fun to do. It wasn't so fun with the amount of yardage. I ended up doing 4 yards that I twisted and I stood across the edge, across the other end of the room. I really couldn't film it, but it was just the same way that I did our small piece. And if you do want to make your own cording, there are tons of different options for you that you can get on Amazon or at Michael's or your local craft store, whatever. And those are meant to do just this, but I use my bobbin winder because I thought it was kind of fun. Those other pieces, you can just kind of tape them to a table, stand back, and they turn and twist at the same time to make the cording. But you know, this would have looked cute without the cording, but I just thought you would enjoy that little feature.
Well, do you feel like you're ready to stitch the straightest lines of your life? I kind of feel like my skills have been improved quite a bit. So I'm excited about that. And so now that we have lesson 1 under our belts, it's time to start thinking about lesson 2. So lesson 2 is going to premiere next month, and it's always the first Tuesday of the month from 11 to 1 in person at the store, or the video premieres at 11 a.m. on our YouTube channel, what you're watching right now, okay? So next month, we're gonna play with multi-direction sewing, or now I think the cool new term is sideways motion stitching. So whatever you call it, it's cool, you're gonna love it, and I'm excited to get started again. Because, you know, nothing says a project like making 3 different quilts at one time. At least they're in different colorways. All right, well, until then, don't forget that we have a lot of other videos that you can check out at our Bernina of Naperville YouTube channel. It's easy to get there. It's youtube.com/Bernina of Naperville, and there we would love it if you could like, comment, and subscribe. Happy sewing, happy embroidery, and everything else that comes along with that. Tschüss.